IDEA is the 1997 reauthorization of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. It really set out the expectation that youngsters with disabilities would have access. That is, it provided free and appropriate public education. We were no longer allowed to warehouse children simply because they had disabilities. It guaranteed them a public education. The No Child Left Behind legislation I see as more daunting in many respects because, again, it sets a standard of proficiency that by the year 2014, every child is to be at grade level in math and reading, and we know that that's a huge challenge.
Now I'll hopefully have my own classroom next year, and I've spent 1 year, 2 years in a graduate program learning about IDEA and No Child Left Behind, and it is completely overwhelming, and I know that it's a practice that takes a lot of time and a lot of experience. But how, I guess to Chris, what would your advice be for me to make sure that when I go into my classroom and I go into my setting, I'm making sure that I meet all the requirements of IDEA and No Child Left Behind?
I think that you should go into your new classroom setting and look for the team members around you. Look for your assistant principal, your principal, all the specialists that can be support for you in your classroom. And ask them and say, you know what, here I've got an IEP in front of me and I see this, this, and this, and I need help. I don't know how to do this. I mean, they're there to support classroom teachers and to support the kids in the classroom. It's been a wonderful piece of IDEA, I think, to learn about the different options that specialists, can bring in with kids, for kids with IEPs, and for me to learn them as a classroom teacher, because you've come in and shown them, demonstrated them in the classroom, and then I can use them. They're in my toolkit. It gives me more possibilities in my teaching, and I think it then just benefits the kids because there are more tools coming at them and they have more options to plug in better with their needs and their challenges. You can also seek out other teachers in the building and say, tell me how you do this. Please help me. I think that mentor teachers are really important for people. And I think that that's also something that you should feel okay asking your principal or your assistant principal for. Say, you know what, I think I really need someone to mentor me in this area. And I think by relying on all the people around you and not being afraid to say, I need some help to do this, I think that will be a good way to get off to a start that's productive. While, as teachers we're always accountable for what our kids know, I feel like the added pressure for me right now is that the people who are judging the outcomes in my class don't know the students in my class. They don't know how many children on IEPs. They don't know how many children's parents are going through divorces and who may have an off day on the day that they're tested. And that, for me, it's not a complete picture, and that the real complete picture is the cumulative work over a year and over time. And a worry for me outside of the classroom is how these numbers are being used to make judgments about our schools and judgments about me as a teacher based on only numbers and only this one drop-in test. And there's nothing cumulative, and I don't know any other profession where it's done quite this way.
It is obviously very, very time-consuming to provide these accommodations and the alternate forms of assessment. It's very valuable, obviously, because it shows where the children have grown and the skills that they've developed. However, sometimes I feel that, the standardized testing, the way that they judge the child's ability negates all that progress that the child has made and still deems the child not proficient. And that's where I get very frustrated, because I know how much time and effort the child has put into it, how much time and effort I've put into it and other staff members, and they're still deemed not proficient. that makes it seem very arbitrary to me, because I know that the child has made gains, and I don't always think that that is reflected.
That is a great job. Let's say you have a child in your classroom and you're trying to determine if that's the least restrictive environment for that child. What are the guidelines that you have to follow? What are the steps that you can take to make sure that you're adhering to IDEA?
Well, again, Jen, you know, it's really set up to be a team. And I think the reason is that not one of us singly ought to be making that decision. That decision, because it's a very profound decision in the life of that child, it really ought to be made in the context of a team, of information and putting all of that together. You know, it's this idea of not relying on any single judgment to make a very significant decision. Teaching is the profession of hope. It's the essential profession, the profession upon which all other professions rest. And I think the work that we do in the public schools really does undergird the democracy. You know, Chris talked about purposes. We know that this is the next generation of adults, and I think your work is the most important work of the society. So I thank you and all of your efforts here.